Your phone buzzes at 11 p.m. with an email marked urgent. You answer it. You always answer it. Somewhere along the way, rest turned into a moral failure and busyness turned into a badge of honor. You know this feeling. But what actually happened 3,000 years ago, when an entire nation was ordered to stop working one day out of every 7, is far stranger than any modern productivity hack. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a wellness tip carved into stone to make people feel better about themselves. It was a command sitting right next to "do not murder and do not steal," as if stopping mattered that much. Why would rest deserve a place next to the gravest moral laws ever given to a people? Go back to the book of Exodus. The 4th command tells you to remember the Sabbath and keep it set apart. 6 days you labor. On the 7th you stop, and so does everyone under your roof. Your son, your daughter, your servant, your ox. Even the foreigner living among you gets the day off. That last detail is the strange part. Ancient law almost never protected the powerless like that. Historians who study the ancient Near East, including biblical scholar Nahum Sarna, have pointed out something remarkable when they compare Israel's calendar to its neighbors. Babylon had its own version of a 7th day, but it wasn't a gift. It was a warning. Certain days on the Babylonian calendar were marked as unlucky, even dangerous. On those days, kings avoided major decisions and certain rituals were restricted. Servants and field workers kept working regardless. Rest, where it existed at all, was a privilege that trickled down from the powerful. It was never a right shared by everyone underneath them. Now hold that up against what Israel was told to do. Every 7th day, the field hand and the field owner stopped at the same hour. The servant and the master shared the exact same rest. Sarna's analysis of the Exodus text argues that no other law code from that world demanded anything close to this. It wasn't only religious ritual. It was a quiet, radical statement about who counts as fully human. Here's where the story gets stranger. This command arrives right after Israel walks out of Egypt. 400 years of forced, unending labor. Bricks without straw, according to the account in Exodus. No day off, ever, for a slave. And now, freed from that life, God tells this new nation to build a stop sign directly into the rhythm of the week, not once the harvest is finished, not after they catch up on lost time, every single week, permanently, whether they feel ready or not. Why carve a permanent interruption into a brand new nation's calendar before it has even built a single city? The 20th century rabbi and scholar Abraham Joshua Heschel spent years wrestling with exactly this question. He argued that most ancient civilizations worshipped space. Their gods lived in monuments, temples, and territory, things you could build, conquer, and physically hold on to. Israel's God asked for something different. He asked to be honored inside time itself, not a building you could walk into and admire from the outside, a day you had to actually enter week after week and let interrupt your plans. That reframes the entire command. This was never about being unproductive for 24 hours out of guilt or superstition. It was about refusing to let your worth be measured only by what you produce. Think about what that idea meant for a former slave. In Egypt, your value was your output. Bricks stacked, rows harvested. Stop producing and you stopped mattering, sometimes literally. The Sabbath told an entire generation of former slaves the opposite. You are not what you make. You still matter on the one day you make nothing at all. Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann has argued across much of his career that this command was never really framed as self-care. It functioned as resistance. Empires run on anxious, endless output. Pharaoh needed a workforce that believed it was only as valuable as its last brick. The Sabbath broke that belief on purpose every single week, by force of law rather than personal choice. Stopping wasn't weakness in this framing. Stopping was defiance against a system built to convince you that you must keep proving yourself forever. Does any part of that sound like you're weak? Because that same pressure never actually disappeared. It just changed its shape and its uniform. No one is forcing you to make bricks without straw today, but check your phone at midnight and ask honestly whether you have stopped measuring your worth by output. deadlines cleared, inbox at 0, a number climbing on a screen somewhere. A day where you produce nothing on purpose can feel almost irresponsible now, the same way it must have felt disorienting to a freed slave who had never known anything except constant labor. There's a detail in the text that people scroll right past. This command wasn't only for people. Read it closely and the ox gets rest too, so does the donkey pulling the cart. In a world where working animals were treated purely as tools, this law paused their labor along with everyone else's. That's not a minor footnote. That's close to the whole point. Rest was never framed as a reward for good behavior that had to be earned first. According to Genesis, it was written into creation itself, all the way back to a seventh day when God is described resting, not from exhaustion, but to set the pattern before anyone else was asked to follow it. So when this command finally reaches Moses at Sinai, it isn't introducing something brand new to the universe. It's asking a freed nation to imitate a rhythm that existed before the first brick in Egypt was ever laid. Stop, rest. Not because the work is finished, since work is never actually finished, because you were never meant to be defined only by the work in the first place. That idea unsettled the people who first heard it, probably as much as it unsettles you right now. A nation built from former slaves was told that unproductive time was not wasted time. It was sacred time, protected by the same law that protected human life itself. Imagine trying to actually believe that after 400 years of being taught the exact opposite every single day. And the tension around this command didn't fade with time, it got more complicated. By the era described in the Gospels, religious leaders had built such an elaborate fence of extra restrictions around the Sabbath that the day had drifted far from where it started. Later rabbinic tradition would eventually catalog dozens of specific categories of forbidden activity. Jesus, according to the Gospel accounts, pushes back on that drift more than once, healing on the Sabbath and reminding people listening that the day was made for humanity, not humanity for the day. That single correction pulls the command back toward its original center. Rest was never supposed to be another performance to get right. It was supposed to be relief. Picture your own week for a moment. Picture a quiet afternoon spent secretly answering work messages under the table because fully stopping feels irresponsible. Picture the low guilt that creeps in when you sit still and nothing gets checked off a list. That guilt has an old history. It goes back further than your job, further than your phone, further than anything you would call hustle culture. It traces back to a mindset this command was specifically designed to interrupt on a national scale. What would it actually look like to obey this, rather than simply agree that it exists somewhere in an old text? Not a passive scroll through a feed that quietly counts as more input instead of rest, an actual stop. A day where your worth is not up for negotiation based on what you produced that week. A day that echoes the freedom offered to people whose entire identity, right up until a few weeks earlier, had been built on forced labor. That is the strange countercultural center of this command. It was never really about a nap or a day off in the modern sense. It was about who gets to define your value in the first place. 3,000 years ago, an entire nation was told that value did not come from bricks made or fields harvested, and your phone, buzzing again tonight with something marked urgent, is quietly asking you the very same question it asked them then. Will you answer it again? Or will you finally learn what it means to stop?